Today, they have bombed my city, destroyed many houses. They didn't launch rockets. They dropped bombs, destroyed many houses. It's not a target. I mean, the rocket which targeted launched. I targeted one building, one window. They had just dropped bombs, which with great explosions.
Everything.
Yes.
The devastating, unceasing human toll. People's lives upended, their homes destroyed as Russian forces advance in Ukraine today. It comes amid continued de-escalation attempts beyond those borders from President Joe Biden in Washington today with a new round of sanctions, and from the U.S. military that has stayed out of Ukraine, of course, physically. A senior defense official telling NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kube today that the U.S. European Command set up channels this week to communicate directly with Russia's military. It's a way of trying to deconflict its tactical movements around Ukraine. Let's bring in the reporter who broke that news, NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kube.
Hi, Nicole.
Courtney, stay with us. We're going to be joined by John Kirby, Pentagon press secretary. John, I'm sure you read Courtney's reporting. We're going to let her ask you about it at the end of this. But tell us the latest, what you understand as night falls in Ukraine.
I'm sorry. Was that to me?
Yes, John. Sorry. We'll start with you.
That's
we
okay.
kept you waiting.
No, that's all right. I'm sorry. My fault. No, look, I mean, we've seen the violence escalate here in major population centers like Kyiv and Kharkiv, certainly Kherson, as the Russians try to inch closer to these population centers, which we believe they want to control so that they can better control the country. Obviously, a lot of attention on what they're trying to do in and around Kyiv, but it's very clear whether these strikes are intentional or not against civilian infrastructure and residential areas, they are hitting residential areas. They are causing civilian casualties and a lot of damage inside these cities. And there's no reason for it, Nicole. There is a diplomatic path forward here if Mr. Putin would only choose that, de-escalate, stop the fighting. There's no reason for this war. Ukraine was never an aggressor and never presented any kind of threat to Russians and their national security.
John, I've watched all of your briefings this week, and I know you're careful to never take the bait on any question about what Putin's thinking or what Putin's doing or what Putin's going to do next. But adjacent to that is what we expect the Ukrainians to have to contend with next. And my question is, are we helping them prepare for a brutal onslaught, a brutal slaughter, as it feels like everyone fears?
Well, I'll tell you, we're doing a couple of things, Nicole. One, we're making sure that they can continue to defend themselves. And they've been defending themselves bravely and quite effectively, very creatively. Now, they're up against a military force that outnumbers them and has a lot of significant combined arms capabilities available to them. But they're fighting back bravely. And that's because the United States has helped put together and lead a coalition effort of other nations also providing them arms and ammunition and ways to better defend themselves. But we're also working, and this is really the State Department that has a lead on this, working with non-governmental organizations and humanitarian organizations to make sure that we can marshal humanitarian assistance to the Ukrainian people, both inside and outside Ukraine. And the UN said today more than 1 million now have fled the country, and that's not counting the tens of thousands that are displaced inside Ukraine. There's a lot of work to be done, and the United States will be at the forefront of that.
John, my colleague Keir Simmons interviewed Sergei Lavrov. He was given a question about Putin's stability. Lavrov notably dodged it. I'm assured it was not lost in translation. I wonder what the assessment is about Vladimir Putin's stability.
Yeah, I don't think we're capable of getting inside Mr. Putin's mind here and to make any kind of psychological judgment. What is clear to us here in the Pentagon is that he has no intention of right now backing off this invasion of Ukraine and limiting the use of force. In fact, quite the contrary. What we're seeing is an escalation in the violence and the bombardment and the damage inside these cities and the killing and the wounding of innocent civilians. So we're very concerned about that, which is why we are focused here on the Pentagon on leading the effort to increase and expedite the delivery of security assistance to Ukraine so that they can better defend themselves. And that's what we're focused on, in addition, of course, to making sure that we can continue to defend NATO's eastern flank.
My colleague, Courtney Kube, a very familiar face to you, has some brand new reporting. I wanted to bring her on and give her a chance to ask you about it.
Sure.
Yeah, you know, John, we have a story out this afternoon about this deconfliction channel that the U.S. military set up with the Russian military. And I think a lot of our viewers may question, what exactly is this? It's a direct line of communication between the U.S. and the Russians. But can you explain why the U.S. military, why the Pentagon thinks this is a necessary step, and what exactly it's intended to do?
Yeah, Court, thanks for that. I mean, as you well know, this is not atypical for us in other places such as Syria, where there is a deconfliction mechanism with the Russians, because if you've got U.S. aircraft and Russian aircraft anywhere near each other, you want to be able to make sure you can communicate to reduce the risk of miscalculation, to reduce the chance that you're going to escalate the conflict. Well, now the airspace over Ukraine is contested. The Russians don't have air superiority, but they are flying in that airspace, and they are launching now hundreds of missiles inside that airspace. So that airspace buttresses up right against many eastern flank nations of NATO. So we believe it's important that we also have a mechanism here to make sure that we can take the risk of miscalculation down. What it is basically, Courtney, is a phone line. It's a chance for somebody, now this is going to be run out of the European Command there in Germany, to be able to pick up the phone and have a conversation with the Russian Ministry of Defense, not to give approval for anything, but simply to deconflict that airspace and make sure that there isn't a chance for a miscalculation or an escalation in conflict between the United States and NATO and Russia.
Is this any sign that the U.S. military and the Russian military are coordinating in the area, or that the U.S. military has any plans to put troops over Ukrainian airspace?
No, Court. There's no coordination. This is not about coordination. This is about communication, and that's really the limit of it. And the president has been crystal clear. U.S. troops are not going to be fighting in Ukraine, and that includes in the skies over Ukraine. This is not about any kind of escalation or moving towards that goal or to that end. It's really about being able to reduce the risk of escalation and make sure that there is an open channel of communication here, so that it's very clear to the Russians as well how seriously we take our Article 5 commitment and our collective security requirements inside the NATO alliance.
Let me just ask one quick follow-up. I mean, I think that people don't understand that perhaps in a conflict, you're always talking to everyone to avoid anything. And I'm picturing Top Gun and Russian MiGs and making sure that no one misreads anything that happens high in the sky. But can you just give us some context, historical context, John, for how often and how frequently and when and where this happens?
It's not uncommon for, in the conduct of our air operations in international airspace, for us to come into proximity to Russian aircraft, even in the Indo-Pacific region with Chinese aircraft. And it's important that the rules of the road are followed and that everybody understands what we're doing. And just as importantly, Nicole, what we're not doing. And so we have those mechanisms in place elsewhere, given the fact that the Ukrainian airspace is so contested and so dangerous. We really believe this is the right step here for going forward as well.